Welcome back to Papa's Archives, where I tell stories I want to tell my kids, but maybe not at the dinner table. And today's topic is going to be bosses. Because, you're going to, if you're already working, if you're watching this way in the future and you're already working, then you'll understand some of this. But if you watch it a little bit when you're younger, I want you to take some of this advice with you, because I think it's really important what I've learned working for different bosses over the years between America and Japan. Now, I'm not going to say any company names today because I don't want to get sued for slander, because I'm going to talk some smack about a couple companies that I've worked for in the past. And even if it's true, in Japan you can get sued for slander. If I say something about somebody, like for example, that guy cheated on his wife and they got divorced, and if I just say that, even though it's true, he can sue me for slander. So careful what you say in this country, especially on camera. But there's some good news in there too. But so for reference, the time frame, today is January 10th, 2023. So the world is changing, and not knowing when you're going to watch this in the future, I imagine it's going to go through some pretty bizarre changes that I can't imagine at this point. But I'm almost 47. And I've been working since I was 13, so I've held a lot of different roles. I've had a lot of experience with different bosses, and some were amazing and some were horse trash. And I'll just start with Japan. I'll compare and contrast with America a little bit as we go along. But some culture shocks to me about working in Japan is that the biggest one is power harassment, because basically everybody has tenure, T-E-N-U-R-E, not 10 years like Junen, not 10 years. Tenure, T-E-N-U-R-E, means you basically can't be fired. If a company takes you on, there's labor laws where they have to keep you on. They can't really fire you unless you do something really bad. So if the company changes and they restructure and they don't need you anymore, they're just gonna bully you until you quit. And by bully, I mean scream at and just make your life miserable until you just quit. And if when they do that, you can go to the unemployment office and tell them your situation and that you left this company because the staff were so brutal, and you can then qualify for some unemployment insurance to help you for a few months until you find a new job. And then that company, they'll call that company, speak to somebody, and they're going to want to verify that what you claim happened. And if they can verify that, they'll give you some funds for a few months, and then they'll blacklist that company. It's called a black company now. So there's a lot of black companies in Japan. There's a blacklist and a green list of universities, for example, for how they treat their foreign staff. Maybe I'll get back to that later, but you can just Google that if you're interested. Blacklist and green list for Japanese universities. But I had some good bosses in Japan, so I don't want to start out too bad. But I do want to talk about the bad ones, because they kind of sneak up on you, and then you get caught. And then you're kind of stuck in a position where, this is your career. Now what do you do? So to put a little bit more perspective on this, I came to Japan in 2004 and worked with a private language school. And I got out before that company crashed, because I'll come back to it, why they crashed. But then after that, in 2005, I went to a high school. I was there for 14 years. The last 5 years I was at that high school, I was trying to build one of the world's largest action sports competitions for skiing and snowboarding and skateboarding and BMX for the first time in Japan. It's a big global brand. You can probably guess what it is if you think hard enough. It doesn't take too much effort. They were very cool to me, everybody there. But then the main company, the solar energy firm in Tokyo that hired me to build that event for them, turned out to be the worst boss of my life. Actually, the CEO wasn't bad. It was the guy under him, that guy was between me and the CEO, who was my acting boss. Just turned out to be the worst person I've ever, the only person I've ever wanted to hurt. Like, and I don't hate many people, but I hated that guy. And then because it was making me so miserable, and the sporting event wasn't going to happen because of some other reasons, I was talking to my wife one day and talking about just how miserable I was and how horrible this was, and she's like, Nathan, just come home. You're done with this. It's not working out. And I was like, I don't have a job. And she's like, well, we'll figure it out. And this is before I knew about that power harassment thing. And I was like, I have 3 kids at home, a house to pay for, 2 cars. I can't just quit my job without having a job lined up. And she's like, besides, this is supposed to be my dream job. And she's like, this is your dream job? So I left. On a Friday afternoon at lunchtime, I just walked out with no plan. And the main reason I did that is because I was really depressed. That guy was just grinding me hard, screaming at me. And the reason I left is because I was really depressed, and I was setting an example for my kids, because if I were to put up with that, you kids would grow up thinking that that's just what work is. And I would probably never talk about it. I'd keep it to myself. Maybe some stories would come out and you'd hear about how horrible my boss was, but you'd see me miserable and you would just think that that's just what work life is. Or I could walk away and show you, hey, it's going to be rough for a couple years financially until you get back on your feet, but you can just walk away. You can just jump ship. It's scary, for sure. But if you don't have the courage to leave that kind of work environment for your own happiness in life, you'll just be miserable your whole life. Like, you have to just take risks sometimes and just trust that it'll work out. So that's what I did. That was 2019. And then I had to settle for a hotel job up at the ski resort, front desk staff, because I needed a job. And that didn't work out because of the boss. I'm going to get into all these details in a moment, but I'm just outlining the jobs first. And then I left that within months because that boss was just boop, boop. That was a horrible situation too. Then I got a part-time job at another high school, and I mean, it was okay. The managers were okay, but at the second year, when it came for a contract renewal, I asked him if he was willing to take me on full-time now. Because when he hired me, he said, yeah, if you do a good job your first year, we'll consider taking you on full-time. And I thought I did a good job that first year. I had 15 years high school experience. Like, you don't have that for many people, and a master's degree. So I was pretty overqualified for that position. And then when I asked him, when I tried to negotiate my second contract, I asked him, are you willing to bring me on full-time? And he said, no, it's just part-time again. And I was like, okay, are you willing to give me a raise? Because every year teachers get raises. And he was like, no, nobody here gets raises. And I talked to other teachers, they were like, yeah, no, nobody gets a raise every year. And I was like, wait a minute, are all of you just part-time? And they're like, yeah. How long have you been part-time? Years. So that school was just hiring all their teachers part-time so they wouldn't have to pay health benefits or anything, and then never offer an increase in pay, and just keep pulling all that private money into the 3 executives that didn't work there. So that whole business model, the company structure, was just dodgy, and I left. I found a different job at a different school again. So I just don't stand for crappy bosses anymore, or crappy businesses. So let's go back to the beginning now to get into details. That language school I was working for, the very first one, it was quite famous. They had like 600 branches around the country. And I think in 2007, or I think they crashed in 2007 or something, I left in 2005. I got out, but within my first 2 or 3 months I was working there, I learned that I was paying 50,000 yen a month for my apartment, which was about 500 US at the time. For my apartment that I had to share with another guy, another employee of the same company. And he was paying the same 500 or 50,000. But the apartment was only, I think it was 60,000. So the language school was profiting off of us paying rent to the school. And they relocated me to a few different apartments, and I went through 3 apartments within like 6 months. Because they just kept moving me to a cheaper and cheaper apartment with my roommate. They just kept moving us, but they kept charging us the same thing. And that's right away I learned, like, oh, you guys are actually profiting off your staff paying rent to you. So that was, as soon as I saw that, I started having to plan my exit strategy, because I can't work for a boss who's profiting off me. What? It just makes you feel like a slave. Well, they were also, now on the student side, they would sell points to the students. The students would buy like 30 points, like 30 lessons. And then they could use those throughout the month. So maybe they would buy like 10 a month or something, I don't know. And if they didn't use them by the end of the month, they just lost them, so that they would lose money. So that would encourage them to register each week and sign up for a lesson and kind of keep studying and not give up their points. Just use them. Well, the schedules were always full and they couldn't get a lesson, so they couldn't use all their points, and they would lose them the next month. So the customers started to get really angry, of course. And the CEO just disappeared. Like, he just left. Took all the money and just disappeared. And then the company did not pay their teachers for months. The teachers were, they have no money, they couldn't even fly home anymore. And they're getting kicked out of their apartments because their boss wasn't paying the rent for the apartment, because that language school, the whole thing just fell apart. It was all over the news, and thankfully I got out before that. I didn't see that coming, but I saw like just how dishonest they were as a company, and you just can't do that and expect to be successful as a company. Then when I went to the high school after that, thankfully before that crash, I got into a nice private high school. I was pretty happy at that high school, honestly. I always felt it was pretty much like family. The teachers were really friendly. The kids were good. But there's no growth in education. Like, if you're a teacher, your salary is not going anywhere. You're just going to be struggling. And so I was pretty unhappy with my salary, and that's why I started trying to build the international sporting event to make a career change. And that took years of trying to secure funding. And I met a guy, a CEO of a solar energy firm. I was trying to build that contest here in Yamagata at the local ski resort, and also build a skate park at the same time. But the prefecture eventually told me I was not allowed to change the soil on the ski ground. So the project basically fell apart. And that was after like 5 years of work. Well, this CEO down in Tokyo, who was a solar energy firm, he was about to retire in about 2 or 3 years. And he had just bought 4 ski resorts for I think it was like $10 million for all 4, because they're all bankrupt. And he heard about my project, and he's like, oh, that sporting event can help rejuvenate these 4 ski resorts. So he called me, his friend called me, who was also my event producer. So that's how the relationship started. And they called me to come down to a different ski resort and check it out and see if I thought it would be a good venue for a ski and snowboard competition. So I went down there and I looked at it and I was like, actually, I think it'd be amazing. This would totally work down here. And then they called me into their office to show me their master plan for the next 20 years, which was to merge these 3 ski resorts into one gigantic, the biggest ski resort in Asia, over a 20-year period, and then building hotels and restaurants and stuff. And I saw that master plan and I was like, yo, this contest that you want me to build is exciting. I'll do that for you. But once we pull it off the first year, each year after that, it's going to be, my workload is going to go down each year. So tell you what, hire me directly as resort development division, and I will build the event for you. And then after that, I will help you with the other events around the resort, event planning and hotel building and restaurant, like all that planning that goes into a ski resort village, basically. I'll help you design that for the next 20 years. And to me, that's a retirement plan. In 20 years, I'll retire and I'll help build Asia's biggest ski resort. And that sounds nuts. And he's like, done, good to go. And then I thought I just nailed the dream job. I was stoked. And that was going to involve us moving our family down to Nagano. So we were going to keep our house in Yamagata, but he was going to buy a company house that he would just let my family live in. And he was a super wealthy guy. And I was like, that's amazing. And he was also going to pay for my kids' international school tuition, which is expensive, very. So he was offering me a lot, and I felt like I just nailed it. The dream job, dream money, everything was coming together. And he didn't go back on his word, but what happened is that was supposed to start in April. So I just left my teaching career now. And sorry, I gotta process this for a second. That was in April 2019. Yep. That I was supposed to start. And then he's like, well, wait and come down. Let's start the 1st of May. And I was like, okay. I just lost a month's salary now. And then we got closer to May and they said, okay, come down the 1st of June. And I was like, man, what is going on with this company? What are they doing to me? I had already signed a contract with them. So it was really awkward because they weren't going to be paying me until June now. And so those are 2 red flags right there I should have paid attention to. But then I finally got down there in June, and what's the process? How did this work? The first meeting we're supposed to go into with the TV company that owns the brand for the sporting event I'm trying to build to bring to Japan for the first time. The first meeting with that media TV channel executives, my new boss, who had been there for years, but I was just there for a week, he tells me before the meeting, he says, oh, Nathan, don't come into the meeting right away. I want you to wait in the hallway. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, there's only 2 of them from America and a translator, and there's like 4 or 5 of us Japanese in the room, and the negotiation balance isn't right, and I don't want them to feel intimidated. And I was just like, what are you talking about? I'm the bridge. I built this relationship with these guys for like 5 years. They trust me. You want me in that room. I'm the bridge in communication between you and them. And he's like, no, I want you to wait in the office. I'll call you when to come in. So he calls me like 30 minutes into the meeting. After the meeting started, 30 minutes later, he finally calls me and he has me come in. And sure enough, the Americans and the Japanese the CEO and the TV executives are already fighting. I was like, what are you guys doing? And the CEO is like, no, I want to have distribution rights, TV distribution rights for Japan. And the TV execs are like, no, that's not, you don't get that. You just get the licensing fee, and then basically you get a huge commercial for your resort. Like that's what the package has always been. And that's what I sold him back the previous January when I met him for the first time at the ski resort. Like I had already done all this and explained the contracts to him, but he just decided to change it at the last minute. And he told those TV execs that he didn't really care about this project. It's just a pet project. It's not his core business. And if they're not willing to negotiate, then they can just leave. And they just left. And I was like, did you just throw away 5 years of me building a relationship, trying to gain these guys' trust? And he's like, yeah, whatever. Well, I learned later that, like the next week, I learned that the Japanese government, there's a feed-in tariff. FIT, feed-in tariff is like for when you build a solar farm, you put energy back into the grid that goes out to everybody. So when you build a solar farm, the government pays you a certain amount of money per kilowatt hour. And at the time before I was hired, it was 42 yen per kilowatt hour. Now, if they know that number, they can plug that into their business plan to build a solar farm somewhere. And when they find that it's profitable, they build it. Okay, so this is higher level stuff I'll talk about another time. But that April, they announced to this solar energy firm, the government announced that they're going to reduce the feed-in tariff to 24 yen per kilowatt hour the following year. So whatever projects they don't finish this year, they lose that 18, whatever, it's 18, 42 to 24, yeah, yen per kilowatt hour, which kind of really kind of destroys their business plan. So the executives for this solar energy firm decided that they were going to stop all investments in ski resorts, and basically my project was done, like basically just canceled. And the CEO is the only one who wanted my project, because he was almost set to retire, and he wanted to retire on top of a ski resort with a hot tub and a nice restaurant and a cool event at the bottom. And the other staff, the other 49%, but they're all executives, they're all decision makers. They wanted nothing to do with ski resorts. I don't blame them. I get it. They're solar energy kings. They went from a $7 million it was a $1 million company to a $400 million company in 7 years, from 2012 to 2019. They were killing it financially. And then for their CEO to go buy 4 ski resorts for $10 million that are all bankrupt and defunct, and I'm asking for another $20 million. Plus the other $100 million we're going to need to develop those 4 resorts. Like, these guys at the solar farms, or at the solar firm, were just like, no, we need to put all of our money now this year into building these solar farms, and we need to get Nathan out of here. So every meeting turned into a screaming fest at me. And it wasn't even just meetings. My boss would pick me up for coffee in the company car for our road trip somewhere we drove around Japan all the time. He would pick me up at 8 a.m. and I had a cup of coffee in my hand. I only did this one time, the first time. This is like the second day I was working there. He picks me up at 8 a.m. I have a cup of coffee in my hand. I get in the car and he starts yelling at me. He's like, why do you have coffee? And he has a coffee too. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I bought you coffee. Now I can't give you coffee because you have your own coffee. And he was yelling at me. He's like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? Sorry, I bought coffee. I mean, so I poured my coffee out, and I was like, and I'll drink your coffee. Thank you for the coffee. That was like my first road trip with him. Day 2 or 3 or something. Well, another time I was in 7-Eleven, and there's 2 coffee machines, one old style where you choose the size, and one new style where there's a sensor, and the sensor can tell the size of your cup. Well, I was using the old one because it's faster, and my boss comes over and he's yelling at me in 7-Eleven, "Why are you using the old coffee machine? The new one makes better coffee." And everybody in 7-Eleven is just staring at this guy like, what is wrong with this guy? And I just yelled back at him like, it's none of your business, dude. And that was when I started to kind of stand my ground with him, because I realized like he was just yelling at me all the time about everything. And I was trying to get a recording of this on my phone, but he saw that I was trying to do that. He was like being really smart about when he would scream at me. But it wasn't just him, it was there's 3 other executive girls in the office that were just brutal. Like, I would walk into their office and they would hiss at me. They'd be like, it was so weird. And then in private meetings when I would have with them, like I would try to pitch them ideas for generating revenue at the ski resort, and they would just scream at me about how dumb the idea was. And I was supposed to come up with like events to build at the resort, but I had 0 budget to spend to build this event. I had to do everything with 0 money. I mean, yeah, they just gave me an impossible task, and then they would just scream at me. So this was what they were doing to get me to quit. And it took me a couple months to figure it out. At first, I thought they were all just psycho. Like, what kind of work culture is this? And then I was starting to click. I was like, oh, you guys just want this out. Because my boss, who was Solar Energy, but the CEO put him into Resort Development Division to be my assistant. And he hated that. Because the solar energy firm, those guys, when they build a new solar farm, they get a commission on that project, and that's a big chunk of all their money, and that's how all these guys are becoming millionaires. Well, he lost that, and now he had to be resort development with me. So he's like, yeah, I need Nathan out of here. The whole company needed Nathan out of there so they could sell those 4 ski resorts for 10 million or whatever to somebody else, and then get that out of their life and get back to solar. Brutal. So in Japan, they couldn't fire me. So they were trying to, because they had hired me, and there's labor laws, they can't do that. So they're just trying to bully me to get me out, and they did. Worst boss, worst company, worst work experience of my whole life. And that sporting event did happen. My event producer did pull it off with the same team that I built, but not at a ski resort. It was just a small stadium event with a skate park. And when I left Tokyo, then Corona hit, and during Corona they built that stadium event, and that's it. So the event happened, but not because of that company that was supposed to fund it. So they just, anyway, blah blah blah. That's those companies. The hotel guy that I worked for, the very next job I had, again, I was desperate for a job and took the first one I could get because I had to pay rent for my house. Not rent, mortgage. So I took a job as a front desk manager, you know, reservations and guest check-in and stuff like that, at a hotel that's on a ski in, ski out hotel. It's a very old hotel, but I was kind of excited to just do something new, just have money again and be at the ski resort and whatever. Well, the guy who hired me was the new CEO. His father is like 17 generation. It goes back hundreds of years, this hotel chain. So the new CEO is the son, and he was like, I can't remember, 27 or something. Quite young, and he just got back from university in the US, and this was his first task, is to take over these 4 hotels at the ski resort. One of which I was going to work at. He hired me, and we negotiated the salary. Took a couple of weeks, and we got everything lined up. And then I had my start date. And when I show up, the actual manager of that hotel, what's wrong with this thing today? The actual manager of that hotel had no idea that I was coming that day, and he had no idea how much they were paying me. So when he found out how much I negotiated for my salary, he got angry, because that's more than the other staff were earning. So my very first meeting with him was him screaming at me at the table that he didn't agree to any of this. And that salary is too high because that's more than the other staff earn, and now he has to explain to them why I'm earning so much. And I was just like, how is any of this my problem? How do you not know I'm starting today? Why didn't that CEO tell you? That young CEO is young, but the other manager, the actual manager of the hotel I was working at, is much, much older, and believed he should have been next in line to be CEO. So he was very angry that this young boy was the new CEO, and the young boy needed somebody, me, to act as a cushion between those two. So he basically just hired me to put me in this position where, of all the new ideas that they wanted to do to renew this hotel that he had been this other guy had been managing, would go through me, and those two wouldn't have to sit at the table together and fight. The fighting would be done with me. It took me a few days to figure that out. And one thing we were going to do is start a new ski school out of that hotel, an English-speaking ski school, because they're so rare up there, and I can do that. So I was like, yeah, we'll start a ski school. I'll be your first instructor, and we'll just open it up to the guests of this hotel and those 4 hotels. And we'll start December 26th, because I didn't want to start before Christmas. And he's like, okay, sounds good. So we set that up, and we got some insurance stuff. People had to sign that they had international health insurance and stuff, and some documentation stuff. So anyway, I had a flyer on the counter at the hotel, and these girls from, where were they from, Taiwan or something? They checked in and they saw that flyer, and they've never seen snow before, and they want to try skiing, and they're like, hey, can you teach us how to ski tomorrow? And this is like early January. No, early December, like December 20th or 17th or something, like a week before the start date of the ski school that we said we were going to start it. And I was like, we don't start until the 26th. And she was like, why not? And it was like, yeah, why not? Why don't you start right now? We want a lesson. We want to do this. And the reason was we just didn't have the insurance thing lined up yet. But I had a waiver signed, prepared, and everything like that. So I got it all done ahead of time. I didn't have a season pass lined up. That's what it was. I didn't have a season pass lined up yet. So I had to use a staff pass, which is fine. But so I went and I asked that manager. I was like, hey, these girls want to take a lesson today. Can I just start the ski school early? This is not talking to the CEO. And he's like, do they have insurance? I'm like, yeah, that's all good. And he's like, okay, we'll just use a staff pass, and yeah, it's all good. So I earned that hotel like $300 that day. And I texted the CEO that I was teaching this lesson. And I was like, yeah, sorry, I started a little earlier than we planned, but these girls wanted a lesson, and so there you go. And then he emailed me back. He's like, we'll talk later. And I was like, oh man, he's angry? So I emailed him back like, are you angry? And he's like, yes, we'll talk later. And I was like, really? So then he had to sit down with me and explain to me that I had broken the rules and I was being childish because I started the ski school earlier than the start date that was planned without consulting him first. And it was just like, the girls were right there. They wanted a lesson right then. I'm not going to call you and have a meeting with you. Like, let me make an executive decision. And he was just playing the hierarchy role, trying to make sure I understood that he was above me. And that was like, right that moment, I was like, okay, I quit. I didn't leave that moment, but in my head, I was like, boom, I'm done with this place. And then another horrible power trip boss. Like, it was so bad between he and I. He was such a lousy power trip manager that other managers would like hold meetings with us and try to understand, try to come to a compromise. Not even a compromise, just try to get him to chill out. But I had already quit in my head, and then I was gone by April. So a lot of talking today. I'm gonna let you go though because it's getting dark. But yeah, the moral of the story is, you know, as soon as you recognize a toxic boss, start planning your exit. There's no reason to sit around and think that things are going to work out just because you're there now, or that you can change this. Because a company culture is a company culture. It's deep, it's old, it's embedded. There's a lot of staff there. There's a lot of dynamics going on. And just because you're new there, and you know, maybe I just have to figure it out. I'm just kind of the new guy. Just start planning your exit. Don't put up with that crap. And then when you do that, when you have the courage to do that, you know, it's scary, but you have this level of pride, which can be dangerous if you have too much pride. But and confidence, and it feels like you did the right thing. It always feels like you did the right thing because you did. And then you got to battle through for the next source of income. That's scary. But you know, once you get that, you're like, see, I knew it was going to work. I knew I could do it. And you kids just watched me from 2019 to now go through the solar energy firm, the hotel, and the high school. 3 different companies to get to this position where I'm at now, and I'm finally happy. So, I mean, it took 3 years. Financially, we were okay. I mean, we bought 2 new cars in that time. So financially, we were fine. But just finding the right boss has been a battle. And I don't ever want you to settle for a boss that you're not happy with. Okay? Promise me that, kids. Because your life is too short. It's so valuable to be on this earth and to have a human experience and to be going into work each day with a brutal boss that will yell at you to get you to quit because he can't fire you, or he can't give you a severance package, or he can't lay you off. And the power stuff, the hierarchy, culture. Just because you're Japanese doesn't mean you have to put up with that. Like, you can not put up with that. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for watching Papa's Archives, where I tell stories I want to tell my kids, but not at the dinner table. And today's topic would have been a bit rough at the dinner table, but my kids have heard pieces of it here and there. But that's it. See you later. Thank you.